Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts Podcast. At the Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. And welcome to episode 40, first episode of 2024. Um, for today's episode, I wanted to start off by talking about some existentialism, kind of the idea of finding the purpose in life and taking in all the knowledge that you gain and finding that meaning. Then I wanted to transition into talking about some great movie prequels. I read an article by Men's Health of all places that kind of cited some great movie prequels that I kind of agreed with, and I just want to have some fun with that. Next, I wanted to transition into talking about a bucket list, basically. My idea of what a bucket list is, and I think everybody has a bucket list of some sort or some sort of checklist of things you want to do in life, and I think it's awesome to have that kind of those kind of goals you want to attain or just those things you want to do. Lastly, I ended it on kind of a long topic, but I wanted to talk about the Kowloon Walled City. It's this place out in Hong Kong, or was a place out in Hong Kong. It was demolished in 1994. That was kind of its own city within a larger city. And I thought it was kind of amazing. And I wanted to share it with you guys. So if you want to listen to any of these topics, please tune in. Stay tuned in. I appreciate everybody for stopping by. As always, please enjoy. But how's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing okay. I hope that things are starting out right for you in 2024. I hope that you're getting things moving, and I hope you have a general idea for what you want to do this year. I know that you're going to go on to do great things, as I'm planning on doing great things. And even if we don't achieve the things that we thought we could or the things that we want to, let's feel good about doing it, right? I'm sick of just keeping myself out. I'm sick of counting myself out and never doing anything. So I don't need a new year necessarily to start that. Unfortunately, that's what the timing was, but let's all make 2024 great, right? I'm doing okay. I'm doing my best as I can. Always trying to do a little bit better than yesterday. I can't, I gotta admit that some days are a little tough. I've been, the first couple of weeks I haven't. I've been trying to give myself a little space to just not like feel like I have to jump into everything right off the bat. But I felt like I should have started the year a little bit better. Doesn't mean I can't start the year better now. I'm just thinking. It's like I'm in a constant state of processing of what I want to do with my life, and I'm turning 28 this year. So it's really starting to put a lot on me. It's starting to put a lot of like I've not like I haven't felt the pressure before, but you get just a little older. I just want a little bit more, and I want to do a little bit more. And I just felt like I keep telling myself it's like I wish I would have started earlier, and I wish I would have thought of this years ago. But thinking of it now, and there's plenty of people that I don't think are in the same mindset as me that think like I did 5 years ago that think they have time. And I mean, I don't know what time necessarily is. I have a struggle sometimes thinking about how long it will take me to do things, and I think when you're thinking about the process of the timing of the process and not actually enveloping yourself in a process that benefits you, I think I'm just doing myself disjustice. I think like I'm thinking that I need to quicken the process that I should have been on this thing, and hey, I feel confident in some parts of the way I think, and I can admit that some things I do have planned out, and I just don't know how to achieve it necessarily. Like, I want to write a book this year, and maybe I can do a little bit more than just a book. But how am I going to do that? Okay, I write it, then okay, so I write it. Then what happens after that? How do I get it out there? How do I get it published, and how do I make sure it's published by the right people? And how do I get that Stephen King book deal where it gets made into a movie? No, I'm just kidding. Oh God. But I just want to like it's just I want these things, right? I know I can do these things, but I have a trouble of like facilitating, how I'm going to get it done. Or like maybe a little bit of this weird like perfectionist view. I don't consider myself a super perfectionist person, but I'm someone that doesn't like to half-ass things. And sometimes that stops me from doing things because I just don't want to like give it half-assness. But when I put myself 100% into things, I know that I have like the ability, as most people do. I just got to do it. And sometimes I'm not going to always be in it. I'm not always going to be able to give myself 100% because of, XYZ and ABC or whatever. So I just got to focus on trying to do something, trying to do a little bit better, expanding myself, expanding my content, doing that as much as possible. But yeah, I hope everybody's excited for 2024. I hope everybody's doing okay. Like I said, I'm excited for the first episode, episode 40. I tried to start it on like, I'm glad I kind of started on like a good even number, instead of like 41 or like 39 or something like that. But yeah, nonetheless, let's hop into episode 40. As human beings, we are in a constant search for who we are. We're trying to figure out the best meaning of our own lives and kind of understand what our purpose is. Who's to say there is ever really a definitive concept or like a singular idea for what we are or who we are? As we exist in our everyday lives, we gather as much knowledge as possible through whatever happens to us, through questioning what we do, sometimes just navigating around difficult life aspects. Existentialism is kind of that idea of finding a meaning to your existence and ask the questions of purpose. There should be a strong intent in life and to come up with that some sort of understanding on who you are. We're constantly in that pursuit for that understanding, but there may not be, a lot of control in that kind of search. There's a lot of things that are out of our control. The nature of existence is a balance between the physical happenings that we endure and in the concepts we have of what we think we should be doing in life, the living we should be living. You know what I'm saying? Often both sides can conflict though, but they both do shape what existential questioning really is, kind of what existentialism is. And like I said, it's about kind of finding that meaning, that purpose, the value of human existence. That's the whole point of existentialism. It's just questioning the greater things in life, not just like your everyday survival, but what's the meaning of it? And an individual's own existence is kind of undefined. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's a little different, and when you're born, it's nothing's really going to tell you what life's going to be. You could kind of look at some people who are maybe born in similar circumstances or whatever, but everybody kind of has their own unique path. The only thing you really can do, I guess, is like take responsibility of oneself through the free will, that you have without any certain knowledge, truly. And that's kind of a hard thing, I think, to kind of lean into. I feel like also a lot of times we all want to kind of answer for things and we want to know why we're doing something. So to kind of have a little bit of this, like, a little bit of like, you'll just take control of the decisions you make, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit from that. Who knows to what you're going to learn though, really. That's the whole point is hopefully you're just open enough to collecting that information. You're defined, I guess, really. Like I always think of thing like it's to being defined by what your existence is, right? And not naturally by the essence of being human. It's a good thing. It's an amazing thing that we all exist, and it's a pretty rare thing, and it's not a very probable thing necessarily when people are born. There's a lot of people that are born, but it's pretty amazing all the things that happen before someone comes into this world. So kind of more so, I think the I don't know how to say. I don't want to say useful because like I don't know what that really means, but when your existence is defined by like how you do things, right? You're defined by the responsibilities and the actions you take in life, rather than just having like being a human. Even though that's an amazing thing, there's no natural. I don't know how to this. It's like just because you're a human doesn't mean anything. That's not your whole personality. That's not your whole life. Just existing isn't the whole thing. You define how that existence is. And truly, like through that constant questioning, that it's a pursuit of a greater purpose. I don't know what necessarily questions you should ask. I think, like I said, with everybody's different existences, you kind of have your own questions you want, and you might need different answers than someone else. So I think with the constant questioning, that's what helps. I think you when you're trying to look at all sides, even when you don't think it maybe is necessary for you, you might feel like, or even it might be a little too painful to question certain aspects or ask those questions. But it's all like it's all in a pursuit of a greater purpose. It's all to know what this all means, what this life means. Nothing, I guess, but yourself really determines who you are. Truly, that's what the whole point of free will is that through the things that you do, through the actions and the interactions with people and all the little things you do, that's part of the meaning. That's part of that finding that meaning, that process. Finding the value, establishing your value more so. And I think like certain I don't know, like certain concepts of existentialism is, you know, there's a certain like absurdity, humans encounter when contacting the world, right? There's a certain like, it's crazy. It's 100%. There's a lot of things that are going to go on, and like I said, a lot of things that are out of your control. And with that balance between that physical things, right, the things that happen and that just are totally out of your control, and you might think that you deserve certain things, or that based off of what yada yada this yada yada that you should be living a certain way. Just contacting the world, just being a part of the world, it's adds all these absurdities, all these like things that you that are unique to you, and definitely, but can definitely define you. It just stops you from maybe like I said, the concept you have of yourself. There's a constant like seeking of order and meaning, but the world refuses that order, kind of. It's because of the chaoticness, because of the absurdity, because of that chaoticness. It's never going to be truly ordered. You know what I'm saying? There's not going to be a one, meaning to everything, one idea that everybody will get behind, because that's just not realistic to human existence. You know, everybody, I think, in their own way seeks order and meaning. That's just what it is. I don't. It's not great to feel, that chaoticness and have like kind of all these forces coming at you at one time. So you want that. It's like a naturalness to like seek order and seek meaning and all that. And sometimes look into those things that maybe aren't that deep, but like, if you don't ask the questions, you're not really gonna know. There's a lot of, I think, like, you know, anxiety. I think that comes along with that existentialism a little bit. The simultaneous dread and, exhilaration that you kind of feel with life. This whole like, what's gonna happen, what's next, and kind of having to relinquish that like control, like that kind of simultaneous dread in the sense of like, well, man, it's like the future, who knows what the future's going to do? It's going to all be bad, or it could just end up not what I want it to be. But also, like I said, with the exhilaration where it's like, oh man, yeah, that could be kind of exciting. And it's like, oh man, it gets me going, but we don't know. It's the only thing you recognize is the responsibility in yourself, right? So you got to let that kind of that anxiety of the world kind of hit you, and just realize that your path is what your path is going to be. And hopefully that it's also, like I said, it's hard because like when you see how other people affect the world, or you feel how like you see how the world affects other people, it's hard to kind of not think about or think too well about how you can control your situation, even though that's maybe really the only thing you can control is your situation. There's really truly sometimes even like an alienation we feel, right? Like sense of being a stranger to the world, or yourself in a way where even though we are all people kind of existing, you're doing your own thing. That's, with the whole meaning, like, you're trying to find what you are, who you are, there's going to be a lot of, I think, of that alienation. You can see people who maybe have like similar attributes and they think similarly and have similar purposes and meanings, but it's like because of individualism that there's a sense of being like a stranger. You're just a stranger in the world, kind of just doing yourself, and you're not always even going to necessarily understand yourself. Everybody questions what they do. You question what you believe. You question kind of the things you're doing, the steps you're taking in life, and whether they're right or not. Whether whatever right is, I don't even know what that is. Existence precedes essence. Something I was kind of touching on earlier is like, you know, you have to like prove your existence. You have to find some sort of meaning for that existence. What you do, and through all that knowledge you kind of pick up, that's what's going to lead to that defining of your existence. And even though, like I've said, it's like it's an amazing thing that we're here on this earth and that we're born and that we're humans, and especially with the vastness of space and all these other universes, it's like it's pretty awesome, man. I mean, it truly is. But just being a human isn't enough. Just being born isn't enough. It's you're born to you could be born to whatever place in life, and you can be born to whatever family, but then you can totally switch what you are, right? So in sense, there's really no meaning or purpose or definition. You exist first. Define yourself later, type thing, and like with the physical, like I say, with the physical happenings of the world, there's a lot of things that can sometimes come into you and kind of maybe stall you in your thinking, and make, like I said, make you have a little bit of that dread, a little bit of that anxiety at times. But that all helps with the knowledge. Questioning is a normal thing. So with the constant questioning and wondering of what's going to happen next, I mean, it helps. I mean, it can help in times. It can take control and really freak you out at times, but that's not necessarily like what the way of thinking that you should have. That little bit of anxiety can it's just you questioning what you're doing, and that's normal. That's 100% normal thing. Um, I was redoing a little bit of research, and I kind of just put stuff together, and so sorry, I'm getting a little bit off topic. Um, what is this? It's so I have things like I said, like it was talking about some like different concepts of essentialism, and one thing it was talking about was the Ubermensch, and I was kind of confused on what I was like trying to think about I didn't understand it. So what I have, it says overcoming traditional values, kind of this herd mentality. You know what I'm saying? It's of yourself, attain something greater, free spirit, and embraces the earth. So I guess that's who someone is. That's like a trait of like someone who's an existentialist. Like this is like one trait of someone who is. I'm sorry. I like I have these outlines, and I get myself so confused sometimes. Um, I guess also okay. So this one does a little bit makes a little sense. Existentialism, like I said, it's truly about the individualism of oneself. It's what you do, and so there's a kind of this concept of like the death of God, which I don't know, I don't really like that term, I guess, but like no external systems like religion can provide answers, type thing, or they're like not sufficient enough. Which I don't know if I necessarily believe that. Like, I like to believe that sometimes putting your faith in certain things can help you kind of guide yourself to a purpose, but I can understand maybe the no not sufficient enough sense where it's like you kind of have to do the thinking yourself, and at the end of the day it's you have to kind of provide your meaning and you provide your own purpose on your own, you know what I'm saying? You ca and, like I said, I didn't like the idea of, like, it being called the death of God, but then okay, I guess then it kinda makes the last thing and like, embracing the earth in the way of, like, free-spirited. Your existence here on the planet, what you're doing here is all you really have, like so, you only want to attain something greater, so keeping yourself in contact with, like, the real world. And I'm not saying that like religion is some delusional thought. It's not, but it's just one of those things where it's like trying to just be like realistic to yourself and looking within yourself to find a purpose. Sorry, I got a little confused on those like last two things. Sometimes I just get to typing and yada yada yada. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I'll just end it. Okay, let's just how about we just end it? You know what I'm saying? But existentialism is just finding that meaning. It's the questioning of life in the sense of trying to find purpose and in the sense of trying to take responsibility for what you do and collecting as much knowledge in a pursuit of something greater. It's kind of it runs adjacent to sometimes nihilism, but nihilism is like a questioning of life that there and just finding that there's no purpose, like questioning things in a cynical way, which that's not what you should be doing. I promote a little bit of existentialism in everybody. I think it's okay to question things and question who you are and value your human existence. And like I said, even though it's an amazing thing that we're, humans that are born on this earth, it's like you have to define who you are by the things you do, by the actions you take, the interactions with people, the way you handle yourself and carry yourself in situations. And based off all the things that happen to you, all the, knowledge that you've taken through your just general existence, how do you use that? Like I said, I think existentialism is a good thing. I think questioning your purpose in life is very okay to do. Definitely, like, I would definitely consider myself a fan of movies. I like I try to I tend to kind of stick to certain movies that I've always loved, and I find it hard to sometimes jump into certain new movies. And but I think one thing that kind of helps me a lot when it comes to like discovering movies or enjoying something a lot more is I enjoy franchises. I truly do. Like when there's multiple movies in a series, I think like it kind of builds a little bit of a lore, right? It builds a longer storyline and kind of creates more of something. And maybe if you didn't like the first movie, that like maybe the second movie is a little bit more of your style, or maybe the third movie is like a little bit better or whatever. And some things that are really awesome, I think, like not only continuing a story forward, but sometimes you get like prequels. And I like prequels 100%. I think like sometimes like I need a little explaining with certain subplots and certain characters. So when the third or fourth movie or whatever down the line is a prequel or something like that, that's awesome. And like I said, it kind of gives, and I like a little history and background, and I kind of like that stuff. Built up lore. So I was reading, as I do, I like to read some articles, and I was reading an article by Men's Health, oddly enough, which was funny, but it was talking about some great movie prequels. And I was kind of like reading the list, and I thought a lot of these were like pretty awesome prequels. I haven't seen like, there's like, let's see, one of them that I haven't seen, but it gave like 8 great examples, and then I kind of thought of some other prequels that I like. But prequels are just great for some film franchises. Sometimes you don't really need prequels, but for something like Star Wars, which I'll talk about in a second, or like The Godfather, which I'll talk about in a second. Those are good because like especially with like Star Wars, there's such like an expanded like lore and like stories within that universe. But yeah, they gave 8 examples, so I thought like I'd have a little fun listing off the examples and just diving into why I think it's a good prequel and what makes it a good prequel. But the first one they had on the list was Monsters University, which was pretty funny. It came out in 2013, and that was the prequel to Monsters Inc. And the league surrounds yourself around Sully and Mike Wazowski, and it's them in college, which I think it like kind of like contradicts the timeline. I'm not a stickler. I'm not going to be that kind of guy, but I think it contradicts the timeline because they said that I think in Monsters Inc. they said that the first time they met was like elementary school, but then in Monsters University they met at college. Like it shows them meeting. So I don't know what's real, but nonetheless a good movie. I like me some Pixar films. I'm not gonna front. So, and I grew up in the generation of a lot of good Pixar films, and Monsters Inc. probably up there for me. So to get that prequel, to get that Monsters University, and I kind of like the whole like fraternities, the fraternity games, and I like that, and in the showing of a friendship forming, which is even cooler, and them getting like the job at Monsters Inc. Which is awesome. But yeah, I recommend everybody watching it. You could be my age almost. I'm almost 30, and like I still watch that. I'll still watch Pixar films. But number two on the list they had was Pearl, which came out in 2022. It's a horror movie, starring Mia Goth, but it's the prequel to X. If you ever watched the movie X, it's by Ty West. That was who directed it, and it's about porn star is going to shoot like a porno on a farmhouse, like farmhouse. But then like the couple that owns the farmhouse is like these two old couple, this woman and man, and they're like psycho, and they like go after everybody and start killing them. So Pearl is the prequel to it. It's like explaining the life of the woman specifically. And I'm trying my best not to give too many spoilers, but she's a psycho. Like they don't paint her as like she was traumatized or something traumatic happened to her. It's like she's psychotic. Like she's just like straight up like and like I said, I don't want to give too much away, but it's like the perfect prequel. And then I think they have another kind of prequel as well, it's a sequel prequel called Maxine coming out. I don't know this year, I think, or maybe next year. But it's if you ever, I love Mia Goth. I think she's absolutely amazing, and so like, I think she's absolutely perfect for like these kind of movies, two slasher type movies. And Ty West he's got a good visual style, and so I'm excited to see what Maxine does. And I think Pearl's pretty fantastic so far. I think it's better than X, just because I kind of like that. Like I just like we get to see a little bit more of that psychoticness. Number three, admittingly, I've never seen. I've seen like parts of the show, but Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. It was came out in 1992, so around that time of like the show or whatever. But I truly have never dove into Twin Peaks. But I respect David Lynch, and I definitely think like his mind and like just the freakiness of like his films and just the way he does things is absolutely amazing. And I kind of like the whole like, why does Twin Peaks the one place where all these like weird things happen? Like, why does it always seem like that's where it all happens? Whatever though. But I think it's a prequel into talking about like one of the characters that becomes like one of the initiating events kind of in the beginning of the Twin Peaks. It's like this movie's talking about one of those characters, I think, and in very David Lynchian style too. It's kind of graphic. Like I think it has to do a little bit like it's prostitution and like sexual abuse and you know what I'm saying. But I heard it's a good movie, and I've only ever like seen like good reviews on it, and I read the synopsis on it, and like I kind of I guess I just didn't remember it that well, but I should watch it, and I know I should because especially if I'm doing something like this, like why not take the chance to watch it? But yeah, it's a good movie nonetheless. It's like I said, but just based off of what it said, and it's Twin Peaks, and I think everybody loves Twin Peaks, and it's kind of become like I think it was maybe I don't know how popular it was when I was growing up, but it's kind of become like a cult classic now. You know what I'm saying? Especially when like they rebooted it, they came back for like that one season run or whatever. Anyways, so next on the list for number four, they have The Godfather Part Two, 1974. That one's kind of I think The Godfather Part Two, isn't it? Kind of like it's both a sequel and a prequel. Like we both get kind of like we get like the past with like with Don Corleone, like with played by Robert De Niro. We get like his like upbringing, like kind of who he becomes type thing, right? Maybe I'm just stupid and I haven't actually watched it that much. Those movies are just like it's like at that point where like I like to try to watch older movies 100%, but it's like stuck in this one area like of the 60s and 70s where like I just don't watch movies from that time period. Not because I hate them or anything like that. It's just I'm someone that sticks to certain movies. That's what I do. And so I watched the first Godfather 100%. And like the third one, yeah, you know what I'm saying? It came out like way too late. It was like in the like 1990 when it came out, so it was like 16 years after part 2. But I mean like everybody loves an origin story, especially when like Marlon Brando was so amazing. It's like why not find out what like his whole character was and the whole start of the family and how it's come to the success it has and obviously you put someone like Robert De Niro in it, and it's like obviously fantastic. And it's like Francis Ford Coppola did he's an amazing director and absolutely did a fantastic film, and always has. He's done a bunch of amazing films. Every Coppola, it's like you can look down the whole family tree. But I'm admittingly like I said, I don't think I've watched that as much as the first one, and I don't really watch The Godfathers as much because those are kind of like the once in a while viewings where it's like I kind of want to keep them as like fresh and like as like exciting as possible. Anyways, next on number 5, we have Rogue One, 2016. It's a Star Wars prequel. It's the beginning of the rebellion basically, and with all the kind of like other there was like the Solo movie and with that stuff, I think it's and especially when you think about like even with like the famous Star Wars prequels, the first 3 episodes, episode 1, 2, and 3. This is kind of a good Star Wars prequel. It's the start of the rebellion, the whole like, order against the resistance, the whole rise of Darth Vader and, who's going to stop the dark side and the whole, taking the empire taking over the universe. And don't remember any specific actors in it. I don't. And it's not like a lightsaber, Jedi battles type movie. It's not like the main episode Star Wars, but it's still good nonetheless. I think it's exciting to see the other things. It's like what do the stormtroopers do? What do the droids do when like things aren't going to them when the Jedi's are kicking ass and stuff like that. Excuse my language. So I think it's one of those. It's a good like it's off the main like Star Wars path where it's not like I said it's no lightsabers and stuff like that. It still has to do with the resistance, the rebellion, yada yada. You kind of find the forming of it. Introduces I think some characters that you see some in like the episode 4, 5, and 6 and whatnot too. I think that it takes place in between 3 and 4. Yada yada yada. Number 6 on the list was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I think the Temple of I didn't know this was a and I don't honestly, and I don't think I think it's the same thing where I think part of it's like a prequel, but not the whole thing's a prequel. Maybe I'm dumb on that. Like I feel like I mix up Last Crusaders and like in Temple of Doom, like those, and then whatever the other one is. God, I'm so stupid. Like I said, I'm a fan of movies, but Indiana Jones, those movies just kind of run together for me. Even though I love Indiana Jones, if you don't have Marianne Ravenwood, I don't like Indiana Jones. Like, so dude, she's not in like any. She's in like two of them. You know what I'm saying? But like, I like Indiana Jones, and even with the new one that came out, the Dial of Destiny or whatever, I don't hate it. But the Temple of Doom came out in '84, and I think some people say the best one, right? I think like maybe the best one, and it's got some good like unexpected moments, like kind of unexpected horror, like horrifying moments in it. And I Indiana Jones, like that whole I'd like to be a treasure hunter. That'd be awesome. He wants to just collect artifacts to preserve them, and you can't hate that. No matter what you believe on yada yada this, yada yada that, you can't hate that. He just wants to preserve history. And I think I always thought it was cool as a kid to think about like going around the world and my voice keeps cracking. Sorry. Going around the world and just like traveling. I think that's really what I want to do. I don't have to go treasure hunting. I just want to see the world. So two more. So number 7 on the list, they had Prey, 2022. Prey was the base. It was the prequel to Predator. It basically takes place around like Native American times, and it's like when like predators, or at least the one that's in the movie, it's like the first time he's coming to Earth or whatever. But it's showing kind of like the early existence of predators coming to Earth, the early existence of these outer world kind of explorers exploring, and absolutely badass with the whole Native American vibe, and it takes away from like all the kind of like guns and lasers that kind of pop up in the future predators, and it just brings it back to basics. It's just kind of this hunter hunting down other beings, whether they're human or not, and a group of Indians who unfortunately have been affected by it, and just them taking control, and whatever the main girl, it's a she's a badass, and she becomes like the king or the queen, or no, the king. I mean, like the leader of the chief of the tribe. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. It's pretty awesome, and like it just makes you think about like especially when the future movies come on and like how kind of badass excuse my language that the predators become. It's kind of cool. It's like it's just cool to see him kind of back to basics and brought back, and it's a simple prequel where it's not doing too much and it's not trying to rechange like the stories necessarily and trying to remake what the predator is. It's just like adding to a couple things like in like the second Predator movie, Danny Glover gets like a freaking like Flint style pistol or whatever, and they like retcon that in Prey. They like show like a Spanish explorer that's like a tracker or whatever that has a gun, and the Predator takes it. So they got a couple things that like kind of cool like that. You know what I'm saying? I think it's kind of so it kind of brings in stuff back into the story. And then last on the list that they had, number 8, was Prometheus, which is the like a prequel to Alien. So it's kind of funny to have Predator and Alien right next to each other. They did the prequel thing. Oh wait, no, I guess okay. So Prometheus, because I was gonna say they did like Alien Covenant, but I don't, that's not a prequel. But Prometheus, this was like a kind of the start of like the releasing of like these like xenomorphs, this other like supposed to be this other being that's supposed to be the perfect human or whatever the heck it is. They kind of got lost around that time. I admit that like Ridley Scott was really amazing with that first Alien, and then James Cameron came in and did like Aliens, right? That was the second one and made it more actiony, which was cool. But that whole thing with like kind of that spookiness that Ridley Scott did with the first one was amazing. And when he came back to the series, you're kind of like, oh man, this is all right. Like we got Ridley Scott back, the guy that kind of was doing it before, and just wasn't the same. And it just like feels like he was trying to do add new like creatures and add new things, and it's like I said, nonetheless, it's a good prequel, and it's still the space horror. I mean, that's just scary to think. That's one of my favorite. Like, I don't watch that too often, and it's not something that like is usually done that well. But space horror is scary. Those like playing the Dead Space games, those are scary. So Prometheus kind of adds back that horror element a little bit, which I liked. Which especially with how far away the Alien movies got with like Alien versus Predator and stuff like that, and like the James Cameron Aliens. It was nice to bring it back. But yeah, that's the eight that they had on the list. A couple other ones that I had like thrown in that I kind of thought of was the 2011 The Thing 2011 was a prequel to The Thing from like 1980 or whatever the hell it was, like early 80 or like 1980. I feel like it was like 1980, but it was supposed to be like a prequel to John Carpenter's A Thing, and they do pretty well of it, even though it's just basically like the original, the Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. It's not the original Thing, but John Carpenter's version. It's just that kind of redone a little bit, but in a prequel form. Like a lot of the things that you see happen in that movie, like are shown like because in John Carpenter's The Thing, they come across that like base and things are already kind of messed up. And so then you kind of get with the 2011 version, you get the happenings of that kind of stuff. And obviously, it's a- I love isolation horror too. Just thinking about when there is people in the middle of nowhere in the Arctic, and this thing that's hunting them down and like, takes control of their bodies and makes it look like the other dude. This is amazing. And it's a pretty decent prequel. Mary Elizabeth Winstead does pretty awesome. And Joel Edgerton too, I think. Another one I had was it's keeping on Star Wars Episode 3. Very famously, the prequel episodes 1, 2, and 3, have not always been taken in very kindly. But I would say if there was a least bad one, I say Episode 3 is the least bad one. I think they kind of just stuck to a certain story. They said, "Hey, we're gonna make Anakin, Darth Vader." In this one, spoiler alert, sorry for anybody that's never seen it, but we're gonna make Anakin, Darth Vader in that one, and they really just stuck to that. Even though his turn's kind of bullshit. Excuse my language, sorry, but it's still pretty good, and I like the whole like him and Obi-Wan had the last battle, and you were the chosen one, Anakin. I love doing I love doing my Ewan McGregor impersonation. That whole like scene's sad, and and then Padme dies, and ugh. But it's also kind of that wink then of like, well, then who becomes of that? Darth Vader, unfortunately, but then we get Luke and Leia. And so then it leads into the fourth, fifth, and sixth movie. So everything's all right. Everything's good. Episode 3, we could take episode 3. And it was like the one that I remember most as a kid. I was like 9 years old, 8 or 9 or whatever. Yeah, it was 2005. So I would have been like 9 or 8 going on 9, yada, yada. But it's like I said, it's one of the lesser bad prequels. And then I had Batman Begins, 2005's Batman Begins. That one's a little iffy because it's like because it shows the origin of Batman. It shows Bruce like becoming Batman. So it's not like it is a prequel, but it's a start of a whole new like series. It's not like a continuation of like it's a new Batman, it's a new thing. It's Christopher Nolan's Batman. It's not Joel Schumacher, it's not Tim Burton, it's not what I'm saying? It's not those guys. And yes, Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher. Those are the guys that did the other Batmans. Yeah, that's Tim Burton. I always laugh so hard. It's because when you watch like Michael Keaton's Batmans, when you watch those first two Batmans, it's Tim Burton esque. I mean, it's like totally Tim Burton all over the freaking place. I laugh so hard at that. But Christopher Nolan did. I think he's done the best with it, and that Batman Begins is the start of Batman. It's Bruce, being in that prison and going up into the hills and training with the ninjas or whatever, and coming out escaping and Ra's al Ghul chasing after him, and him going into the cave, starting the Bat Cave, and all that stuff. And so yeah, it is a prequel. I just think it's weird because it's like a start of a new franchise. So it's just an origin story. It's a new thing, even though Batman's not new. But yeah, that's really it. Those are just some great movie prequels. I think like when we talk about maybe like the like X-Men movies that have come out, like the First Class and like Apocalypse and stuff like that, those have like the prequel-ish things, right? The First Class is definitely a prequel. But there's other movies, right, that are the great prequels. I guess I just can't think of any. I'm saying there's great ones, but I guess I can't think of any. But I think that helps a lot, especially sometimes movies can be a little confusing, or you there's some stuff that kind of just don't get explained, and or like we want to know a little bit of backstory of certain characters, like how do they become the way they are. And so, movie prequels are awesome. And like I said, as a fan of movies, I'm always looking for a little bit expanded lore on all my favorite movies. I think most people probably have like a quote unquote bucket list or whatever, a list of things you want to do, achieve, accomplish, experience, or whatever, in life. I think I'm, no different than that. I think everybody wants to do cool things, and it could be different from person to person, right? Some people just want yeah, they just want to go travel across the world, and that's good enough for them. And some people want to jump out of planes, or they want to like run marathons, or da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? I think it's kind of cool. Like, you don't need necessarily a bucket list to achieve things, right? You don't need to have like a checklist to check things off your life. Life. What am I trying to say? You don't have to have a checklist to check things out of your life like that. Yada yada. But I thought like I try to think about things that I want to achieve, right? I try to think about things that I want to do, exciting things that I might not get a whole lot of chances to do, or that like might prove something to myself. I think that's kind of the point of a bucket list, right? It's just having things that show you that you can do something, and show you that life is a little bit more. I show you the beauty of life, the kind of the things that things are in order, that the things have in order for you. And a lot of times, like I think with my bucket list, like when I try to think about things I want to do in life, it relates to a lot about like success or something like that. I think like there's certain things like I want to write a book. That's like a big thing on my list. Is I would love to write a book, or write multiple books, or something in that order. Just write stories. It's hard sometimes, but if I could achieve that, that would make me feel really good, and that's 100% I have something on my bucket list. And I don't think that's something that I'm gonna have like where it's like I want to do this by 40, or I want to do this by 60. I just want to do that. I'd like to do it now. Obviously I want to do it now, but it's one of those things where like most of the time you don't want to give yourself any sort of timeline on that sort of thing. Maybe unfortunately there will be a timeline on some of your items on your list, but I don't think with the book thing, like I can do that forever. I can always try to do that. I always wanted to travel. That's another really big thing, is like I think I can do that now. I can do that, I don't have money, but like if I had the money, I would just go do that. And then, that's pretty easy to go check off my bucket list, right? And that's something I think a lot of people have on their bucket list, is that are those, everybody wants to travel, and I want to do like a cross US tour, like I just want to go see small towns, and you get in a. One day I always say I want to live in like a van and just like travel around and go to small towns and pop in, and hopefully I live like a certain lifestyle. If I can write some books, god dang it, no, just kidding. If I could just like get myself in that comfortable position where I don't have to always worry about money, I can just kind of take care of myself. And I always say I just want to go, disappear in the corner of the world, and not disappear and like not talk to anybody necessarily, kind of, but like I just want to go do my own thing. I just want to be that guy. Like I just want to go live in the mountains and live in a nice, decent little house or something like that, or just go travel around the world. And I think, like I said, I can do that. I know I can do that, and I don't need to be successful to do that, and I only need a certain amount of money to do that. But I think when you think about like then going to all these cool destinations, there are things that you want to do there. When you go to Italy, there's things you want to do in Italy that maybe you can't do in Germany. And then when you go to Germany, there's things in Germany that you're going to do in Italy that you can't do in like England or whatever. So just keeping that's where the list expands. I think I'm always going to be adding stuff to like the bucket list, the ever expanding bucket list. Like I said, whatever that even looks like, my lifetime checklist. I think all of us want to do a little bit of that. Always want to do a little something exciting. Go places we've never done, and go play or never been, and do things we've never done. I know that some of the scarier things, like I think about like you know I've always wanted to try. I think about sky. There's some days where like skydiving seems pretty cool. Like I'm not particularly scared of heights. Like I don't like the heights, as I think most people feel a little trepidation. Like there are certain levels of that you're not supposed to be above the ground, especially when you're used to being on this certain level and everything's at your eye view. So it is it's unsettling. Everybody can, I think, everybody's a little scared of heights, but skydiving seems cool. It seems, jumping out of a plane and, with the parachute is gnarly, but that's pretty awesome. Gliding through the air. Everybody, people, when you ask people what their superpower, what superpower they'd have, some people want to say, they say flight. So why not go skydiving and live out my dreams? I always watch those like base jumping videos. Ooh, base jumping would be crazy. I would try base jumping though, I think. I don't know. I would have to do a couple. I'd have to train like crazy. I have to go in those like indoor like, like air tanks, you know what I'm saying? Big old fan tanks or whatever. I just think that's crazy, dude. I just don't even know, man. I'd have a heart attack. I just like that stuff's cool. I love looking at I don't know why I watch that kind of stuff. And one of my biggest fears is like cave diving. Like I don't want to get stuck in caves, but god dang it. If I don't think about it once in a while where I'm like, I'd like to go exploring in a cave, I don't want to go like, how like some people are like extreme, they go diving into caves, they go like in the crevices where they're like squeezing through, they gotta like take off their backpacks and squeeze it ahead of them. I ain't doing that. But I'll take, a few, like, I forget, like 10 years ago or something like that, maybe a little long, or 15, maybe, like a little longer than about 15, 10, 15. I went like on spring vacation with my dad and like a couple and my little sister and a couple of our friends and my older sister. And we went to California, but we stopped and looked at some caves and it was pretty awesome going in these caves. But you look at some of these chasms, you look down at some of these caverns and you're like, it's pretty endless. And that's pretty scary to go down and just think about like even trying to rappel a few feet. Eventually it gets so dark and just thinking about like ugh, what's down there. Even like not even just not I'm not talking about like bodies or something like that. I'm talking about like bugs, I'm talking about like ancient diseases that people haven't seen in a while. But I think a lot of people always have dangerous things on their bucket list like that or scary things like that. Because like it's a once in a lifetime thing. Like I'll go cave like spelunking kind of like that. Not where I'm squeezing through tight spaces, but I'll go one time. I'll rappel one time. I'll go skydiving maybe once. I know you have to do it a couple times to really get a feel for it, but it's like the good thing with like when you're first doing skydiving is there's someone with you. But like I said, I would say like a lot of things is stuff I want to achieve. I think that's the most of the stuff that are on my list is always are things that I want to achieve, the things I want to get done. In the book thing is one thing. I want to write a book, and that's what I want to do is be an author. But I'm trying to expand my content. I'm trying to get better about just getting over myself and being on camera and stuff. And so the podcasting will continue, but I don't want to be a podcaster. That's not what like I've not. It's never been the dream. Podcasting was just a way to give me that confidence. You know what I'm saying? But if I grew it into something, that'd be awesome. But I want to grow myself. I think more so. I think that's a big thing. Is I always want to constantly like better myself as most people do, but I always want like anything I achieve, anything I do in life, I want it to be personal. Not saying that I want to take all the credit or something like that, but I want to make sure that people know that I'm doing it for myself and or like I don't know how to explain that. I just like I don't want to be fake. I'm not going to be a liar. I don't want to do like little trends on the internet. I don't want to do like that stuff. When I post videos and I say something on camera, I want it to be real. And when I write something, I want you to know that I wrote it. Or like if I make music, I want you to know that I made that. Just trying to do my best to always be like that. Always be like so confident about the things I do. That's a tough thing. I think that's a bucket list. That's off the bucket list, buddy. That's stuck in the permanent, ingrained brain list right there. Confidence. That's a big thing. It's like I'm always trying to gain confidence with anything. It's always like always working on that. And so I think that's really what's stopping me. I don't, I think this year I could do all that stuff. If I just got a little more confident with it. I'm working. I'm definitely working on that stuff. Like I said, I'm a little lame to most people. Like my bucket list isn't exciting. It's not very long, and and maybe if I experienced more life, if I was like more out there in the world, it would be a little different. But I don't think I could sit there and really list anything because I don't ever want it to be like a thing where like, oh, I check it off, I'm done, or like something like that, or where it's it has to be seen as a goal. I just want my life to always have to be want to be I just want my life to be obtainable to anything, to nature, or giving me whatever it gives me, but also making sure that I try to put myself in that best position for that kind of stuff. If I want to travel the world, then, what do I got to do? I got to make a little money. And, how can I, what, just besides going and having fun in another country, like, how can I put myself in another country? Well, tours or, doing whatever or doing this, like if I got fans in other countries, that's like the perfect reason to go there, right? Like, that's a big thing. I would like to get more fans. That's a big thing on on my bucket list, and always constantly just gaining like followers and just getting people to like not just follow me and be popular, but follow me and like truly like appreciate the intent I have behind my content. And I'm always just trying to have good intention behind my word, and I'm never trying to like ever come at it with like a sense of like you must do this or this is the definitive definition of this. I just like to talk, man. Like, getting a lot a little off tangent on this topic. We're talking about bucket lists, but I'm talking about talking. But anyways, I just always want to have good intentions. Anyway, let's get back on the bucket list, man. How long have I been talking? About 10 minutes on this topic. I'll talk a couple more minutes. I got one more topic after this. But like my bucket list is like it's open. I don't know. It's not endless. It's just open, right? There's so many things that especially as I get older, and from time to time, things will change. Like I'll want to do things, and then I'll want to not do things, and this will become the priority, and this will become the priority, and so I don't think there's ever really a truly like safely definitive way I think of thinking about like having a bucket list, but I think everybody does a little bit. There are definitely at least things in a checklist you have where if you said, if I can accomplish these things, if I can experience these things, then I feel best. And I think that's an awesome thing to do. I think having that list of things that you want to accomplish, a list of achievements that you want, or a list of experiences you want to have, I think that's awesome. I try to do my best with like deepening my knowledge of the world. I try my best. I love like looking up the history of things and looking up like just how people have like lived for through different cultures, through different time periods. You know, especially when it comes to like historical places. I, when I often think about historical places or whatever, I think of ancient places, right? I have a tendency to kind of think like as maybe most people do. I think about hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And it's a lot of things don't last very long. There's things even that we have no idea have existed. Think about all the even besides the things that we know in like history books or in the echelons of history that once existed. There's things that we just never knew. Random buildings that could have been, places that were important, but just because of the loss in time, you just never know. But some places stick around and they evolve quite significantly. And even though they may have been gone for a certain amount of time at this point, but nonetheless, they've been around for a long time. I forgot where I was like specifically reading, but I came across something I thought it was just blew my mind. There was this place in Hong Kong called the Kowloon Walled City, and Kowloon is like its own like city in Hong Kong, and the walled city is like it's like an enclave within that city. And it was once I have like a bunch of I'm gonna try to do my best to like just read everything I have just by tale. So it's gonna be a little factoidy. I'm just gonna let you know. But it was once the densest city on Earth, considered once the densest city on Earth. It was considered this like ungoverned kind of enclave. It was too much of a hassle to like control everybody there. And when, police or government would try to get in, they were often pushed out. So ungoverned is loose, but an enclave, it was this enclosed place. It was filled with like these tall, narrow tower blocks, 300 plus buildings, all of them like 10 to 14 stories high, tightly packed together, literally like touching each other from all sides. That's the craziest thing. And there's like dozens of little like back alleyways and little staircases that go up to the different stories, and it's just like this literally this enclosed place. And each typical unit was about 250 square feet, so like a tiny box, and that includes like residents and like businesses as well. 26,000 square miles total, which that's kind of hefty. That's not a bad little size, but still with like how, then you think about how tightly packed it was, 350 buildings, 300 plus. It was like 300 to 350 buildings. I couldn't tell. There was 20,000 different premises, all including like households and businesses, and more than 30,000 residents located in this walled city. And it was apparently all happened because it was demolished in 1994, or it started in 1993, demolished in 1994, and it was in the Kowloon City, which is in Hong Kong. But it was when Hong Kong was under British control, oddly enough, which they were under control from like for like 99 years, from like literally the end of 1800s to like 1990s. And so that was like it was like I said, ungoverned and largely lawless place, which is, kind of loose because the police couldn't do anything because they were often pushed out, and it was hard to govern all those people, especially when they were kind of just doing their own thing. So there was a lot of like banned products, and unfortunately some criminal activity. Like the triads, I think, controlled a lot of it during the 50s and 70s. A lot of like gambling, drugs, prostitution, and also like unlicensed like doctors and stuff like that. And things like in those kind of practices and whatnot. But it was literally like this, it was this place that people lived and grew up in, and it, like, you never saw the outside of, and it functioned as its own place for so freaking long. Yeah, the demolition started in 1993 and finished in 1994, and now it's the Kowloon Walled City Park is what's there, which opened literally like the following year. And I think some of the artifacts, like remaining artifacts, like the Southern Gate or something like that, and some like the old administrative building, I think are still there. So some, which is cool. And I'm about to get into like the history of like the Kowloon, it's the walled city, and it goes back pretty far. It's pretty fun, like funny how long it lasted, and like it kind of it's they don't know the exact date when it traces back exactly, but it's been around for a few hundred years. Just warning you, okay? So, history of the Kowloon Walled City. Originally, it started as kind of like a military post. It has traces back to the Song Dynasty around like 960, 1279. So 1,000 plus years ago, which is pretty unreal, or around 1,000 years ago. And like, yeah, it was used as a military outpost, used to kind of manage trades. And that was really all it was for like hundreds of years. It was just to manage trades in between like, places. And then eventually a small fort was established after Chinese forces abandoned. It was the Tonglong Fort, which I guess was nearby in 1842. So that they yeah, so they yeah, a small fort was established. Hong Kong Islands ceded to Britain, to Britain by treaty of the Nanking Peace Treaty, ending the First Opium War during the Qing Dynasty. Sorry, there's a Qing. Sorry, I'm trying my best. I will try not to butcher too many names. So it was around the time of the First Opium War. It was like Opium War. It was like trying to like build a fort. It was trying to like help fend off like, forces. And then like this was around the time that the British came in, and the Britain ceded to Britain by the Treaty of Nanking, which is a peace treaty ending the First Opium War. I don't know how peaceful it necessarily was, but improvements were made. There was a defensive wall that was like put up around that fort in 1847, and then apparently it was like briefly captured in 1854, but then taken back a few weeks later by some rebels. It was like taken, and then it only lasted for a few weeks, dude. But I guess like I said, this is when it was started becoming like something more. Became like a military fort rather than just some like random outpost, like random place, which is pretty cool. And then in 1898, the Convention of the Extension of Hong Kong Territory, the new territories handed it to the Brit it was handed to Britain for 99 years. So this is when British control took over. So 99 years, so 1997, which I knew, I think, like growing up, but obviously they didn't rule when I was growing up. But I remember like in one of the rush hours, they make like a reference to it, and like that's that's where my culture comes from is rush hour, dude. But I kind of just remember hearing about it, obviously in school with history and stuff like that too. But it excluded the Kowloon Walled City, which at that time was like wasn't as like big as it was, like as it would become, but it excluded that. And at that time it had roughly around like 700 residents. So it was already kind of like building up a lot. It was actually like it was a place that people lived. It was like a military, like as military bases kind of are. I don't know about 700 residents, but a lot of people there. Chinese officials allowed occupancy as long as there was no interference with British Hong Kong defense. So as long as there was peace. Um, but then then I had Governor Sir Henry Blake suspected a resistance in 1899. So British forces attacked the walled city. And the resistance forces apparently gone. So I guess he was right on the resistance, guessing. And only the residents were left behind. So a bunch of military forces were left behind, but only the residents were left. And then the King dynasty, the Qing dynasty, ends rule in 1912, leaving the walled city officially to the British. So like before, the British were not allowed to take it because of like it was part of the treaty, and then it was left to the British. But the British did very little with it. It was like a few decades before anything they even like decided to do anything with it. Because it was just like its own thing. It's always kind of the history of this. Like all I ever read was like it was its own place. Not a lot of people could do anything with it. Yeah, so it was filled with like old people's homes, schools, charitable housing. It kind of felt like it was like described as kind of just like a tourist spot for the British for a long time, which is kind of interesting to think, especially when all these people are living there. But I guess world travel wasn't as big in that time period, right? The British knew just because the British had occupancy there, so it was like an extension of Britain at that time. It was, like I said, merely just a tourist spot. 1933, Hong Kong authorities announced demolishment of decaying walled city buildings. So like all the buildings that were kind of like ancient and falling apart, they decided to get rid of. And they said that like it was filled with a bunch of squatters, like all these residents kind of left over. So they said that they were going to compensate them with new homes in the same year, basically. And the nationalist Chinese government, I guess, protested and claimed jurisdiction over the whole walled city, and like made those claims for like the next few years, like 1935, 36, then part of 37. And then with like the war between China and Japan around that time, which then eventually like with World War II eventually happening eventually after that, like it would be it became it like wasn't they had other things to worry about. They had other things to protest or whatever. By 1940, really the only things that were around was the administrative building. There was like a school in one house, I guess, remained, which I don't know. I don't. Yeah, one house is what I wrote. One house remained. I don't know how true that is, but that was totally demolished. Like they said they were gonna, and a lot of it was old and stuff like that. But it kind of I think, gave them a sense that then they could rebuild. During Japanese occupation, the forces demolished the wall. So I get okay. So during Japanese occupation, forces demolished walls to use the stone for expanding the nearby what is now known as the Hong Kong International Airport. Before it wasn't. So the Japanese did something with it. Sorry, that's my fault. I wish I would have put that before. That's my fault. But which is kind of crazy. Just like it does, but they obviously the Japanese didn't care about Chinese culture. So yeah, they were going to use it. It didn't matter to them. But yeah, that's just like the start of the history of it. But then eventually it became kind of an urbanized area. Around 1945 is when Japan surrenders. China had the intent on reclaiming the wall in 1946, and so nationalist Chinese officials created like a new outline. Basically, they wanted to add in like new offices, schools, police station, other kind of functions or whatever, and refugees from the Chinese Civil War, post 1945, and the like 2,000 other squatters were allowed to occupy this walled city in all by 1947 and 1948. So all of a sudden, a flood of people started coming back into this walled city, and it was kind of like when China finally gained back control, when Japan surrendered and left. Um, I guess there was also an attempt to drive away, and it was like a failed type thing where like I guess the squatters were like not welcomed, and so there was an attempt to try to drive away, and it failed. And the British decided like because of just kind of the harshness and how they just couldn't control the people, they adopted a handoff policy regarding the city. So they basically just said like, you know, they said, here you go, China, you can deal with it, even though we occupy you, you can control it. And then the nationalist Chinese government announced really no intention of relinquishing jurisdiction, and so the British were like, okay, yeah, sure, then you can have it. But then also the Chinese were like saying, like, you also have to accept the fact that we're not going to force that jurisdiction. That we're going to take over the jurisdiction, but we're also not going to force it, which obviously through like the history of that, it was going to be pretty difficult for them to do that already. So because of kind of the lawlessness or whatever. But it wasn't all hunky dory. In 1950, there was a fire that destroyed part of the walled city. 2,500 huts, 3,500 families were like displaced. 17,000 total residents, so 17,000 total people, were displaced after this fire, and it kind of like highlighted a need for proper facilities, right? And it was complicated to kind of help out with that kind of stuff because of like a lack of political enforcement. And but it was a chance for like a rebuilding, and this is when like urbanization I think really started to take off. And there was like I said, there was no government rule. That's like a whole thing. Is like that jurisdiction that the Chinese government said they had that they wanted to take control of. They weren't gonna like use it. They weren't gonna enforce it. So through like no government rule gave way to yeah, sorry, it became a haven for crime. I'm just I was rereading the same line. It brought crime in, a haven for crime basically. And then apparently like in 1959 there was a murder trial that kind of gave awareness to the Hong Kong government, that things are going wrong, that things are going bad. But it was hard for anything for them to still do anything because the triads had kind of like stepped in. And beginning in the 1950s, around that time, there was like that's when they kind of gained the stranglehold. And the police would try to venture in like in large groups, but it just was never successful. And then around like about the time like by the 1970s, it became too much. And then apparently between 1973 and 1974, there was more than 3,500 police raids, 2,500 arrests, 4,000 pounds of drugs seized, and the power of the triad started to wane. They really went in and just did their thing. And then apparently by 1983 is when officially the police declared the walled city was under control. So 10 years after. But I think because of all the stuff that kind of was like the result because of all that lawlessness, I think that was a hard thing to do. It took a long time to push out all that stuff. In the 1960s, it brought on like massive construction. That's when I think things really started to like look the way it did, or like they started expanding in the way they did. And it was like new modular structures above old ones, so very much so those box kind of structures, and they were just building it on top of itself, and it took on a world of its own. This is when things really started to take off, and the max size, I guess, really reached around like the late 70s, early 80s. That's when like they reached about that 300 plus building mark, and they were limited to 13 to 14 stories. Apparently they wanted to go higher, but there was a closeness to the airport, to the Hong Kong International Airport. And also with like that airport, there was like a lot of noise pollution, so apparently it wasn't that great. And there was 8 municipal pipes that offered water, 8 total pipes. Now I know there was wells and stuff like that they used that had that gave water as well. So as well, well. But apparently, like there was lower level street lights that were lit by fluorescent lights due to the lack of sunlight. So artificial sunlight as best as they can. Even though there was like a diminution of the crime, like the rampant crime, there was still like a high number of like like banned products, unlicensed doctors that would operate. So there was still a little bit of this like own jurisdiction. The walled city had its own jurisdiction. Most residents, I guess, weren't involved in the criminal activity. It was just like they lived peacefully. It was literally like this place that people just called their own. It was a community thriving in its own. And there was a bunch of businesses and factories that did very well. And apparently a lot of residents would form these groups and charities and like, societies, religious societies, welfare groups that would try to help out and maintain the life of that walled city. And they were doing their best. I just the facilities weren't great, and with the lack of of government control and stuff like that, and or intervention at all, there's only so much you can do within a governed city. You know what I'm saying? You're a walled city within a bigger governed body. There's only so much you can do. I do know that the Hong Kong government though did provide some public services, just some, like as much as they could, I guess. But eventually the demolition came around. Quality of life was always really far behind. There was always a reported thing that, people, even though they tried to do their best, it was a miserable way of living. And in 1984, the Sino-British Joint Declaration um, of Hong Kong transferred Chinese control. So I guess it was like officially like one of those things where like, yeah, officially just yeah, giving it the control to the Chinese. It was a mutual decision to demolish the walled city. Then it was kind of like one of those things where it was like I said because of poor quality of life, the buildings weren't necessarily great. It was just not nothing good was going on. They declared it in 1987. They decided that's when they wanted. They decided those were the plans, and they wanted to form a new park, which apparently at the time was already like a really big thing. They're already building like a lot of parks, so people were kind of unhappy, but not too unhappy. It didn't matter. Another park is always okay, but displacing all those people, 33,000 residents and stuff like that is unreal. But 2.7 billion Hong Kong dollars were used to compensate these citizens. Apparently, some citizens were never compensated properly and were forcibly evicted. Obviously, between 1991 and 1992, that's when everything was really going down. That's when they really started pushing people out. Which I don't know what the Hong Kong like populate the homelessness is or kind of how things have been affected since then. But that's a lot of people. 2.7 billion dollars, Hong Kong dollars, American dollars. It don't matter. That's a lot of money. But it just the all of a sudden you got to make people live somewhere else, and you're forcing them out, which is that's a tough thing. But then it was 4 months of planning. Demolition began in March of '93 and ended in April of '94. And then the following months, the construction of the park started, and so that's the Kowloon Walled City Park is what they have there now. And even with the remnants, I think of like things, and I'm sure a lot of people that like lived in that walled city are still alive. I'm sure there's tons of people and I would like to know, what was the outcome and where'd they go? Did they stay in Hong Kong or did they move somewhere else in China or move to another country? But I think it's kind of fascinating on this walled city, this kind of enclosed like life, this like everything's so close knit. It's a close knit community, and you think if there was a little bit more of like intervention with the government or if things were done a little differently, that it could have been this bigger thriving thing. And I know that like out in I think in like Saudi Arabia or something like that, or out in the Middle East, they're trying to do like the thing called the line, which is like like civilization built in a big lined like walled thing. Look it up if you ever want to see something cool. That's pretty cool, I think. But nonetheless, I thought it was cool. Like I said, I'm trying to expand my knowledge on the world as much as possible. So looking up all the things about the Kowloon Walled City was pretty awesome, and it was a pretty amazing feat of human existence. Alrighty, friends, that's really all I have to say about that. Episode 40, first episode of 2024, done in the bag. Appreciate everybody for tuning in as always. If you want to listen to this episode 40, I always make sure to post it on YouTube as well as Spotify. You can always check out either like my past episodes as well as my future episodes. If you find anything I say relatable or enjoyable in any way, then I always appreciate a little support. You could subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. You could follow me on Spotify. You could also follow me on a few different social medias. I have Instagram. I also have Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter. I'll always make sure to link those below in the video description, as well as like my channel description or just any bio I have. But yeah, I always appreciate the chance to get on the microphone, talk to everybody. I'm glad that 2024 is here. I've got the first episode out of the way, and I'm hoping to expand my content as much as possible and, get ahead on podcasting and so I can open up whatever I want to do on YouTube or anywhere else. But nonetheless, I love y'all. Don't forget to tell someone you love them as well. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.